least the known world ended with the flood and the earth changes that took place. So we say that it ended by water. The destruction here, that's looming right now, and which is reaching a peak around the 2030s, is destruction by what? Fire. Very good. So it's complementary opposites, yin and yang. So we're facing a fire destruction. In fact, we have been. That's what the whole, you might say, motion or trajectory of history has been moving towards. The development of technology, right? The use of fire for heating, for cooking, for weapons, for power, for energy, right? But it's all now converging and is leading us to the threat of worldwide destruction by fire. So Micho's view was that this is the paramount issue of our time, is to prevent, if possible, that global destruction, or failing at least to pass safely through as many people, friends, as possible to survive and then create a new world. So he says that is the ultimate goal of macrobiotics, at least at this time. Social goal. So he says, yes, helping people recover their health is great, creating a sustainable world is great, but anyway, on a larger scale, it's passing through this time. Because there are many cultures that have these legends about alternating destruction by fire and water. See, that was known from ancient times. And most of the ancient ones have to do with the water destruction. Now it's fire coming here. Anyway, this was an interesting theory, and when Micho was presenting this is really, you might say, the essence of his teachings, I would say, in the 70s and 80s and really up to the present time. And I was always intrigued by this, but I had my doubts, because so much of this has to do with mythology and with events, prehistorical events for which there's really no evidence. So over the years, I was intrigued, but I always try to have what we call macrobiotics non-credo. You've heard of that? Do not believe. That's been a central teaching, which is again found in many great people over the ages have used that principle. Don't believe just because your teacher or some authority tells you, but you have to test it and discover for yourself. Only then, once you make it your own, can you then proclaim that. Okay? So, in respect to this, I had some major concerns about this. But at some point, it was very interesting. I was studying Greek mythology. And particularly the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are the two great epics by Homer, kind of one of the foundations of Western society. And these stories, as you may know, take place during and shortly after the Trojan War. Trojan War was the greatest war of antiquity, and it took place in modern-day Turkey. And the story is very simple, that during a visit to Sparta in Greece, ancient Greece, by Helen, who was a queen of Troy. No, I'm sorry. By Paris, who was a prince of Troy, who came to Sparta on a diplomatic mission. He either abducted or eloped willingly with Helen, who was the queen of Troy. I'm sorry, queen of Sparta. So in other words, he stole the Greek queen, and they went back to Troy. And the Greeks demanded that she be returned. And when she wasn't returned, then they said all the Greek states were asked to send men and arms and ships to get her back. And she was proclaimed, she was known as the most beautiful woman in the world because of a mythological contest that had taken place. And Paris had been the judge of the contest. And the three goddesses, main Greek goddesses, were Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena. And they tried to bribe Paris, who was a young shepherd. He'd been the judge chosen by Zeus, head of the gods. And he said, so he had to judge who was the fairest of the three goddesses. That was the subject of the contest. And so they all tried to bribe Paris. So Hera offered him total power and wealth, because she was the queen of heaven. Athena was the goddess of wisdom. She offered him knowledge and enlightenment. Right? Total enlightenment. Aphrodite, goddess of love, offered him the world's most beautiful woman. So it was no contest. Paris chose goddess of love, right? There was supposed to be a fable for human consciousness, right? Love dominates. Anyway, so he chose. So that's why when he goes to Sparta, Helen, the world's most beautiful woman, falls in love with him and vice versa. And then they run off together, starting the Trojan War. That's the story. So the Greeks send almost 100,000 men to Turkey, and then they have a siege for 10 years. And it's a stalemate. Neither side can prevail. So, according to the Iliad, the first of the great epics by Homer, Achilles, who is one of the leaders of the Greeks, who is now refusing to fight because he's having problems with the other Greek leaders, is prevailed upon to come back into the combat. But he knows that he's not strong enough, because the opposite Trojans are led by Hector, who's this really powerful giant warrior. So the god of metallurgy, he goes to the underworld, and the god of metallurgy is asked to provide him weapons, divine weapons, in which he can win the war. And it's very interesting, because Homer he digresses and he devotes 4 or 5 pages of the epic to description of the divine weapons that Achilles receives. It's very interesting what he receives. He doesn't receive a spear or a club or something to beat his opponent, he receives a shield. What's this? Big round shield. And the shield, it's not just a big bronze shield, which was the main metal of that Bronze era. But the shield is actually a work of art. And Hephaestus, who is the god of metallurgy, paints the shield. And what he paints on the shield is very interesting. He starts out in the center by showing all the constellations in the sky. And then he draws the circles. 4 circles. And the first circle is painted with a mural showing people out in the fields gathering the crops in a very joyful kind of Thanksgiving environment. Second circle of the shield shows people herding animals. Cattle, sheep, goats. But then conflict and war breaks out. Third circle of the shield is called 2 cities of war and peace. And they're alternating scenes of very prosperous, joyful community, and then pestilence, war, famine. Cities of war and peace. So, quite clearly, through the Homer's description, what we're getting here is a description of the history of humanity. So it's a reflection of all of the historical tableau, so to speak, of humanity. Then the 4th circle of the shield is the most interesting of all. Any idea what that might be? Fire. Well, you've got the cities of war and peace. The 4th ring or orbit shows, it's called the circle of the dance. And it shows people joyfully coming together, dancing, sharing food, living in peace and harmony. And when I saw that, when I read that in Homer, I was totally amazed, because I said, that's exactly the same as this. It's just that it was displayed graphically in a very different way. Here you have the circle. You don't have the circles, you've got 4 quadrants. Here you've got 4 here. You have the center, you have the stars on the inside, where this one has the stars on the outside, but they're the same stars. And when I saw that, I knew that that was the 25,800-year cycle that Homer was talking about. And even beyond that, then I suddenly understood the whole essence of the epics themselves. Because they're referring not just to a local war that took place $6,000 years ago, but they're referring to what? Yeah, they're referring to the whole journey of humanity. And Helen of Troy, for example, very, very symbolic she represents not just a beautiful woman, not just a queen, but she represents who?
Love.
More than that. It's so clear. She represents paradise. She's lost paradise. She's the one who's been stolen, see, or abducted. And so now suddenly the Greeks are at a loss. They can't exist without her. So it's humanity has lost that beautiful era of peace and harmony. So they mobilized to try to get her back. Anyway, it became very, very clear. And then when you go back to other Greek myths, any of you, I don't know if you know the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, the great musician who goes to the underworld to get his wife back. It's the same story. You know, she dies suddenly at the peak of her power. She's the most beautiful. He can't live without her. He goes to the underworld to get her back. And in that story, remember, God or the Lord of the underworld won't give her back until he has a wager in which he says, well, I will play some music on my harp, because he's the world's most beautiful healer with music. He says, I will play you a song, and you know, if I don't move you, if you don't cry and everything, he says, then you can keep her and I'll go. But he says, I think you know, I don't think it was really her time to die. But if I can move you, you'll give her back to me. So the Lord of the underworld is this very stony-faced God. Says, nobody's ever moved me in 10 million years, you know. Try your instrument. So he does, and you know, within a minute, he's crying because it's so beautiful and poignant. So he says, stop. He says, here, take her back. So he produces Eurydice, but he says there's only one ground rule about going home, which he says even I can't fix for you. And that is that you can talk with each other, you can hold hands, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot look back at her while you're proceeding up to the world of light. Because if you look back at her, what will happen? She will be lost forever. She will go back into the underworld. So the story, the myth is, you know, that they go back to the world of light and they have all the usual challenges of the serpents and the river and the swaying bridges and the foliage and everything. And, you know, they're right there. But at the very end, when he gets right up to the opening of the world of the light, he looks back. And so that's one of the greatest moments, famous moments for a lot of paintings by great, you know, masters, showing her falling back and he's reaching for her. Because eternal separation there, because he's looked back. And I felt that way, actually. When I was visiting Mount Fuji once in Japan, and I actually went down into the volcano, you know, it's a volcano. And then when we came back up, I could see the light. I felt just like that. It was a really interesting experience. But anyway, she definitely represents lost paradise. Same thing as Helen in that journey.
What's the name of this legend? Orpheus and
Eurydice. Again, that's there's operas about that and movies. And it's one of the most famous Greek stories, Orpheus. Anyway, I guess the point is that I found my confirmation for this cycle in Greek mythology. It was very clear that they were talking about the same thing here. So this fourth quadrant here is return to paradise. It's building the new world, or utopia. So if we pass safely through this era here, then humanity will create a whole new civilization built on more spiritual values, more humanistic, more sustainable, whatever you want to call it. So that's what Micho said. That was really the essence of our macrobiotics, was to kind of help take humanity through this era and then rebuild over the next 6,000-7,000 years, so that once again, when Milky Way comes overhead, then this will be a peak golden era. But he says this time it'll be not only the Earth, but probably the whole solar system or even beyond. Because again, the spiral, we're not just recreating the old way, but we're taking a new turn. So we're going out into the, so that's like why all of this outer space stuff is so interesting right now. And I saw the new movie, The Martian, over the weekend. Highly recommend it. Martian, yeah. It's actually the best-selling movie at the moment, but it's really good. Because again, it's about visiting Mars, and then he gets stranded, and then they have to rescue him, and then the whole world gets, is involved. It's quite exciting movie.